Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to QF2, quite Franklier. This is the second installment of our Howling Mad Murdoch series based on the Alex Murdaugh case. The trial, of course, of Alex has ended, and Kayla and I, welcome, my dear. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Not too bad. The trial is over, and of course, it's some might say, well, it's a moot point now. It's all done. Well, it's not done. There's still the financial crimes to be solved, to be rooted through, rather, and also we know that it's a case that's going to be studied for decades, if not centuries, because of the nature of the complexity and the layers of it. So, first, what we were going to do basically first. Um, he was found guilty, obviously. Sorry for the spoiler, guys, but I'm sure I'm not the first one to tell you this. What was your thoughts on the verdict? Did you believe he'd actually get convicted?
I actually did. I did think that. A lot of times in these cases, it can go either way. And then even a lot of times with these people, they'll get off, by their way off. And I just felt like with this one, his shit had gone on for so long. It caught up with him. And I think he had wronged so many people for so long. He just couldn't escape this one.
Hmm. I think that I was until the GPS data, and then of course the Snapchat video was important. I was worried that there would be some jurors that would be swayed by the bullshit witnesses that came up and said, "Oh no, the person had to be this tall, and the person had, he's this tall, and this is where the shot was presumably aimed from." And their attempts to discredit the theory that to try to get him out of the idea that it could be him, but they never came up with another shooter. There was no concrete, well, who could it be? If it was someone else, if it was a drug runner or some Colombian you owed money to, then who? And if you knew that, if you cared about your son and who was killed brutally, and your wife who was killed, and never expressed like an urgency to find the real killers like OJ after he got, declared
Right.
innocent, then why don't you name names? Who is it? If it ain't you, then who is it?
Exactly. And the whole fiasco and the whole diversion of he's addicted to opiates and he's going to go to rehab now, it was just so contrived, and it just felt like, okay, all right, you're just doing this as a total distraction for people to feel sorry for you, rather than if you were really upset about what happened to your family, just like you said, why wouldn't you give suggestions? Why wouldn't you tell secrets and point police in the right direction, that sort of thing?
Hmm.
But it never was about that. It was always about him saving himself every
Yes.
time.
Yep. And then also the fact that he went and he actually, the other smoking gun, in my opinion, was him taking the stand. He tried to
Mhm.
obfuscate things. He tried to do the whole country boy dumbo shtick, but being a lawyer, no one bought that.
Absolutely not. It was so gross. It was so gross. Sitting there crying, this fake crying, spit coming out of his mouth. Paw-paw. Oh God, it was nasty. It was just so nasty.
We laughed about
Oh
that
my
because
God.
he never mentioned in three sled interviews, he never said paw-paw once. It was always Paul or Maggie. It was never Mags. And that was clearly an attempt to make it seem as though they were closer. They had these cute nicknames for each other.
Mhm.
And either way, guys, we're going to continue where we left off from the Low Country episode 1. We're just going to play a little bit more, start from the CNN segment that I edited in there, and then we'll continue going through the episode. So
Years. All four of you graduated from the University of South Carolina School of Law, correct?
Yes.
Because Alex Murdoch also graduated from the same school.
Randy and I graduated together.
His brother.
Yes, his brother.
Growing up, the Murdochs, even over in Bamberg County, people knew who they were.
Randy, I have stories I'll tell you. I was talking to a lawyer here in town who said his old law partner, who was a big political figure here in town, got a call one day from old Buster.
Buster is the nickname of Alex Murdoch's grandfather, a solicitor who served for 46 years.
And Buster said, "Counselor, I know you can help me out here. My boy's gotten into some trouble and needs to be gotten out of it. and I know you can handle it. And so the lawyer jumped right on it, and within an hour he'd made the calls like we could do in the good old days and make problems go away. And he called Buster back and he said, "Solicitor, I got it taken care of. It's all gone." He said, "Well, what I owe you?" He said, "Solicitor, I don't need to be paid. This is a favor." And he said, Buster then said to him, "Well, counselor, if you ever need to kill a man, you bring him to Hampton County." And whether that was true or false, maybe a joke, that was the reputation, and that is what that community has dealt with for decades.
I found that so chilling, even now to this day, when I listen to that again, that exchange. First of all, that guy's a really good storyteller, Jim McCullough. And you don't get the sense for a minute, and maybe they intended it that way, they filmed it that way. You don't get the sense for a minute that he's really joking.
No, I don't think he's joking at all. I think maybe he said it with a little bit of, little sly kind of little whatever added to it. But no, I don't think he was joking at all.
Mm-hmm.
Because
oh, sorry.
When he said back in the good old days when we could make problems go away, that right there tells you a lot.
Well, I think it's a question. I mean, really, what this case has done beyond reopening up the Stephen Smith case. I don't believe the case with the housekeeper, the death of the housekeeper, is being reinvestigated, but it may be. And then the Mallory Beach incident, of course, there definitely will be some look into the chicanery and the possible other scandals that were washed under the table or swept under the rug, and then correlate it to present day and explain. Because I mean, if you think about it, it's clearly systematic generational wealth, but systematic corruption within the county, as well as owning the establishment, the means with which to obtain justice, and you could subvert anything you need. It's really like a little bubble. It's like a bottle glass city, like a city inside a bottle, and you control who goes in and who comes out.
Probably they can't do anything with the older cases, obviously, with everyone gone.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's a situation where it just takes that one person, that one thing to happen where kind of the house of cards starts to fall down. And I do believe that all of these people from all the years are going to start coming out. They're going to just start coming out slowly and telling their stories, telling what happened to them and to their family or people they know.
Mm-hmm.
And it is going to be an absolute show that goes on. I mean, it goes back generations. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You said you noticed that Paul was getting kind of drunk.
He was just kind of like swaying a little bit. Couldn't tell that he was like drunk before, but then like he started like yelling at Morgan, and like I knew because he does that when he's drunk. He just was just being rude to everybody.
When we left the dock, things were starting to catch up. Late, cold, foggy. I mean, everybody been drinking, wasn't smart. Paul was drunk, too drunk to be driving the boat.
Paul was drunk, and Paul was much worse when he had alcohol in him. Then Timmy shows up.
Paul had an alter ego name for him of Timmy when he became intoxicated. They would know that Timmy is coming to surface because they would notice how his hands reacted.
How bad is your drinking when they've created a moniker for your alter ego, like a superhero or a supervillain, as the case may be?
Mm-hmm. They knew this had been going on for years.
And it's a little eerie because in that video, that CCTV video, you can see Paul with the phone clearly up, like filming stuff, and that turns out to be the smoking gun in the case. It's a little, like I said, it's eerie in retrospect.
He
sure is.
Yeah. He's drunk a lot, and it's just kind of like he just is a whole other person when he's drunk, and he like does this thing with his hands where he like spreads them apart, and like he can't keep them together.
His hands would be such that he can't bend his fingers or he can't make a fist. His hands are sort of spread out wide with his fingers spread out wide.
Every time he drinks, it's like it gets out of hand like that, where he doesn't know what he's doing, and he like, does like the hand thing.
So if this is it's clearly a neurological thing that's being affected by the alcohol, and we discussed it, I think, in the first episode a little bit, and it lends itself to, like, if there was brain damage as a result of major drinking. And from what I read, there was a lot of drinking was very encouraged in that family. The father and the mother, they didn't give a shit when they had parties or whatever. They were clearly allowed to drink. And kids being that age, they might seek it out anyway. I get it when they're younger, but it doesn't seem as though it was that tough for them to obtain it in any sense.
No, and I watched the Netflix documentary as well, and it goes a little bit deeper into kids' private lives with each other. And that was one of the things that his girlfriend said, is that Alec and Maggie would supply them with alcohol. They would, I guess they had like a little guest house on property. Also, they would take them on trips and things. So it was right there. They would give it to him. And this had gone on for years, like, 14-ish is when it had started. So he's only 19 here, and he's getting that drunk, where his hands are like, spread apart. And
how are with that kind of affliction, how are you supposed to hold a wheel of a boat to steer it?
You couldn't. I mean, they were saying that he was so drunk that he would just walk away from the wheel as well. He would just walk away from it. Right. And like forget he was driving. And, another one of the boys would go up behind him and grab the wheel so that they didn't, flip over.
Yeah, exactly. Or if a current that's the first thing that would happen, especially at top speeds, is the wheel would take whatever eddy or current and then all of a sudden flip. And it's not like it was a boat with a lot of stability. Boats in general, I mean, the smaller they are, the easier it is to just wipe out. I mean, if it was if it was some huge yacht or something, fine, maybe you could let it go, like Tommy Lee in the Pam Anderson video, using his dick to steer it. But
I don't think paw-paw could do that.
Probably not, no. And either way, we'll continue with this one because, like if you say in the Netflix documentary, I haven't gone through it yet. How many episodes was it, or is it just one long?
No, it was either 3 or 4, somewhere around there. It might have been around 4. But yeah, it really focused heavily on even the relationship between Paul and I think Morgan is his girlfriend. I get them all.
Yes.
It was super abusive, like really abusive to her in ways that like it shocked me because he was so young. There was an incident where he was choking her. They had gone out and, they were in a hotel after. He was literally choking her around the neck. And I believed her. We've talked in the past before about some people, you don't quite believe the story that they're giving. But with her, it feels very real and very genuine. And even the kids on this boat, before the wreck, he slapped her and spit in her face. Before this accident. So he was a fucking nightmare. He was horrible.
Yeah, Paul was a little shithead. And I know there are some quarters out there who some element of the people watching the case that'll tell you, well, he wasn't always drinking, he wasn't always like that. And if you're like that regularly, or if you're like that even a few times, clearly there's some problem going on, and clearly you don't see the whole iceberg. And if it's, I guess what I'm saying is, it doesn't sound like it was ever an isolated incident of him drinking, first of all. And if that's the general behavior, that he's so famous that he becomes Timmy, this psychopath, essentially, who knows how awful he is without the alcohol. Exactly.
Because I don't think that alcohol adds anything to you. I think it brings out what's already there. And in his case, he was drinking so much. He was already a dickhead without drinking. So it just multiplied it. And if he did have a nickname, he had done some pretty shitty things for it to be a thing. he was so awful.
So we'll continue with this, and the one thing, the constant I wanted to ask you about, Anthony Cook. When he as sedate in the Netflix series as he is in this?
He is, and I tell you, it kind of goes a little bit deeper because in the last one we were kind of like, why did he still hang out with him? Why would he be around him? I think Anthony was just a really good person, and I think they all grew up together, and he just loved him as a person. So I think he was very torn in that, because he did see both sides. He did see the asshole version, but then he also saw, the young kid version who really loved Miss Gloria, they would call her. So I think it was really, really hard for him. And the Mallory, that was pretty heartbreaking, him talking.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was probably a little bit of guilt also because he didn't force the issue and say, look, I'm taking over the wheel, or I'm actually going to not get on this. I'm taking a girlfriend with me. We're fuck this, didn't have the strength. And yes, they were all drinking. So I could see that aspect of it. And also, as you said, if he knew him when he was a kid and obviously wasn't drinking as a 6-year-old or 7-year-old, that might weigh on your recollection of a person's memory, and also the fact that Paul has been brutally murdered. That might actually give you sympathy towards him retrospectively and retroactively rather. And I think that all is weighing on him, on top of the fact that he's most likely being medicated just to get through,
absolutely
PTSD and what have you.
Absolutely. And, think about when you drink too, your own judgment is impaired. So it was just a mixture. It was just a really bad mixture of nobody having good judgment, everything being chaos. So of course you're going to walk away with guilt too.
Yep.
Which is probably another reason he missed it.
Yep.
They knew that there was a turn at some point, that this wasn't the Paul that they normally knew, but it became this Timmy character that did things that don't sound especially appetizing.
Paul was being really mean to his girlfriend, slapping her a time or two, spitting in her face.
Paul starts acting out. I mean, he's just doing stupid stuff, like he starts driving the boat around in circles.
This had ceased to be a joyride and had now become a very frightening concern for their safety.
At one point, Paul kept on hitting the throttle, and my Anthony stood up and was like, "Take me to the nearest dock, because if you're gonna keep driving like this, then I'm gonna just get an Uber from somewhere." And Paul was like, "This is my boat," and Anthony was like, "Let me drive." And Paul was like, "No, I'm not gonna let you drive." So at this point, Paul takes off his shirt, he's just walking around all buff and stuff. And then so Connor starts driving for a little bit, and then Paul, he stops Connor, and he's like, "No, this is my boat, let me drive."
Some of them were huddled down in the bottom because of the way Paul was acting, but also the speeds that they were going. This guy is angry, he's bitter, and I think it became a battle somewhere in there that Connor wanted to take him off the wheel, and he wouldn't have any of it.
He was riding.
So you've got this little entitled rich kid, and I mean, let's be honest, we can't say we know everything, but it sounds like anything he ever wanted, he got. And this is no different. And the most disturbing, one of the most disturbing things about this is that CCTV footage when they get them to the hospital, and the grandfather and the dad, Alex, are both in there walking around, doing their thing, trying to cover their fucking ass. And then on top of it, the kid is following them as if to say, "Look, mommy, look, daddy, I shit," like a cat pointing out where it shit, instead of going to the litter box, and trying to cover it up with toilet paper instead of litter,
It also just goes to show you that how many times he had been saved. Grandpa Buster and passed. His immediate reaction was not to call 911 when everything happened. It was to call Grandpa to come save me. Yep, because I fucked up again. Oops.
And so how many times could this possibly have happened with him? And the other thing is, people got to remember, this oyster what was that, oyster bake? Did they call it, or oyster roast or something? Something I can't remember. Oyster barbecue. I don't know
An
what it was.
oyster bake, right?
Oyster bake. I guess I don't eat
We
them.
don't
I don't know.
have those here.
Yeah. Okay. Um, I think that's what what they referred to it. I believe it was hosted by the grandfather, and that's another reason why the kid that he
Yeah.
would go to the hospital, because he would be culpable possibly for having served booze if witnesses start getting their stories together and say, well, no, there was booze at that party and no one was checking these kids. No one was making sure these kids weren't drinking. As a result, the you know, it, protecting their ass in that respect, as well as, protecting Paul's ass. But we'll get to that, guys. It's just and you found this Snapchat stuff here, like the phone videos, also a little disturbing as well.
Very disturbing. Very. And there was another one that I saw. I think the girlfriend, Morgan, had taken it with him, and Anthony is talking about that particular Snapchat. And he said, if you look at his eyes are just boring right through you, like just, zapping a hole through you. Then he says, that's just because he was so drunk. He was trying to focus on what you were saying. Like he just was in another world, but he looks evil. Like his
Yes.
eyes look evil.
Yeah, the kid, I mean, you could just, every photo you see of Paul, he looks like a shithead. I don't mean to color, like it's hard to look at those pictures and not picture and not know the whole background of the situation and keep that away from your mind when you're looking at the photos. But he always has this look of, what we say, resting bitch face. It looks like resting entitled little fucking asshole face. Like some jock from the football team that can push people around and no one, like a bully, I suppose.
He is. Yeah, he absolutely looked like a bully. He reminded me of like one of the 80s villains,
Yeah.
but like a super, super bad version.
Like what's his name? God, the one from the Blacklist. What's his name?
I knew you were going to say that. I loved him in that. James Spader.
James Spader from Pretty in Pink.
Yeah. Oh my
Who's
God.
clearly too old to be in high school in that film.
You stop. He was perfect.
Yeah. Oh, it's just unbelievable.
We coached like sailboats. They were parked and doing donuts, and Morgan was like saying how she was done with him, and then he just started calling her like a bitch, and he was like, "You're such a whore," and all this kind of stuff. I saw the bridge coming. At the last second, like I like screamed.
Christ.
The scream and the bang. We hit the pilings on one side of the bridge, and when I came to, I was on the other side of the bridge.
I really don't know how they all didn't die in that impact, because that was a very small, I guess the stock where the steering, what do you call it, the steering column would be, kept it from getting completely sheared off, because it would be like a motorcyclist like riding their motorcycle, and then there's a fishing wire across the road to just decapitate them, because that thing, the bridge, and I don't know the dynamics of the geometry or the whole lay of the bridge and what it was like. If they just hit a solid object and then tumbled in the boat, that should have been enough to kill them all based on that impact, that speed.
Yeah, and really the most, of course, outside of Mallory, who passed away, but the most damage done was I think his name's Connor.
Mm-hmm.
He broke his jaw.
Yes.
And like everyone else just got like cuts and maybe a broken finger or something. It really is kind of amazing that they weren't all mangled.
Yes. And that, I mean, I don't know, unless, I guess, also what would happen, of course, the what do you call it, the stern, the end of the boat would fly up, perhaps, like as the impact happens, sending people flying.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Well, he did say that he was on one side of the bridge when they hit, and when he came to, he was on the other side of the bridge.
Wow.
I guess it did project them forward.
Whew, crying out loud.
It did. Can you imagine? Like, I can't swim very well. Like, I can barely stay afloat.
Yes,
and just
I'm the same.
be on a boat gives me the creeps, and just that they actually went through this. How awful. I mean,
I don't know that
oh,
I don't know that you'd ever be able to get on a sea vessel again,
mhm,
ever.
mhm. No way. No, no.
Yeah.
Molly came running down there to me and asked me where my Aunt Mallory was.
Mallory was just like nowhere to be seen. Like it was just like he disappeared. Then Paul came up and he was just in his underwear and he tried to help Morgan. She was like, "Get away from me, like I'm fine," but Mallory's missing. I was like, "Call 911."
What bridge is Paul? What bridge is this? Oh, what bridge?
911, where's your emergency?
We're in a boat crash on Arthur Street. There's 6 of us and one is missing.
Hey, I got a description of that female for the boat accident. All right, it's going to be a 19 years of age, white female, blonde hair, pink shirt. She was last seen in the water, but they cannot see her now.
Come on.
Sit right here. We got everybody coming out here. You're my concern, okay? Listen, so you're not in trouble. Right? Do you want to call that? I need to call her. I need to call her.
When the phone rang that night, I almost didn't answer it. But, you know, you get a phone call in the middle of the night, it's scary.
Y'all need to come to me for quick.
As soon as I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong.
Mom, there's 50 cops here, Coast Guard, everything.
And I'm just thinking of the nightmare of this being a night boating thing and finding a person who was thrown from a boat. And then there's currents, possibly taking it further away. And it's literally a needle in a haystack situation there.
It absolutely is, because I've been to South Carolina and I can't think like what the current is there. Like I just can't recall it.
Mm-hmm.
But I most recently have been to Savannah, and just looking at that, and you look at that water, it's pitch black. It's like asphalt. It's so black at night. And to just think, if the currents are moving so quickly underneath that, like if you are somebody who's been knocked out,
yes,
you're just going to get taken away. And probably
Right.
if you didn't, die on impact, you're drowned
Yes.
as the water was taking you away.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, unless you got, I don't know, thrown onto some kind of like weeds or something, and then I don't know, like marshland, whatever, that was shallow or something like that by some chance. But either way, so if that was Paul on the phone, so he did call 911 first, did he? Or
No, that was Anthony.
Oh, that was Anthony. Okay. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
that makes way more sense. You're right.
Right.
And and so Christ almighty. I'm just trying to think also, in a situation like that, when you're drunk, like, do you even know what's going on? The shock. It sounds like Paul was the drunkest of the lot, because they all sort of still had the presence of mind for certain, I don't know, to be a little quicker on the uptake, as diminished as they might have been by booze. If he was that loaded, God only knows what he would have said and done.
Yeah.
Oh,
There,
man.
and I can't recall if this documentary shows him with the what is it called? The police camera on their body cam. Jesus.
Yes.
He's bouncing around. He's like looking for his phone, like wanting to know where his phone is, like just not concerned at all.
Mm-hmm.
One, and again, they're not as drunk as he is, but still, Anthony knows what's going on.
Yes.
And he says later too that he literally was in his arms And then he wakes up and she's just gone, just completely gone. He knows there.
Find Mallory. It's been 30 minutes. We can't find Mallory.
What's your last name, buddy? Murdaugh. M-U-R-D-A-U-G-H. Okay, what's your first name? Paul. Have you been checked out? Right, Andrew? Yeah, I'm fine. Can I use?
Yeah, I'm fine. Fucking hell.
I know. Yeah, I'm good.
Shirtless in whatever degree, like it must have been fucking freezing that night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Of course, you're not going to feel it getting that fucking soused, but and then you're in front of the cops and you've just driven a boat into a goddamn bridge, but you're fine.
I'm good. I'm good, dude. I'm good.
Oh, Christ.
Paul's first thought was, let me call my grandfather, Randolph Murdoch, the former solicitor who knows all the law enforcement there. Paul was thinking 2 steps ahead, which is, I'm going to need help. And my grandfather's the best person to give it to me.
You don't do this unless you've done it before.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
Because fear would take over. Like everything else would come first, not I'll just call the sweep up patrol and they'll deal with my shits.
The cleaner. I'm going to call the cleaner.
Yep.
Because don't you know, a normal person, even if you're drunk out of your mind, a normal person would not think to call my granddaddy. No, you're going to be worried about your friend who is missing.
And so let's go scroll forward to Alex Murdoch and the first, what do you call it? The first responders to the Moselle estate. And he's there and he's got his arm, he's got the flashlight on, he's got the all new clean duds, but he's checked out the bodies. You know, he claims he's checked for a pulse. Did you check for a pulse while you were on wires over top of the body, like Mission Impossible? And so only your hand touched the
He had a stick. He was poking.
I was going to say, did you have gloves on? So anyway, we'll continue.
When we got there, Anthony was shaking and shivering, and he didn't want to go. He did not want to go.
Anthony is obviously overcome with anger and guilt at the fact that his girlfriend is missing. He sees Paul coming within a close physical proximity to where he is.
Get that motherfucker right there away from me.
He has some very telling admissions on camera.
The last time I grabbed my girlfriend and got down in the bottom of the boat, I begged and begged and begged and begged to let me drive.
Paul was driving the boat, and the fact that Paul was responsible for the fact that Mallory was missing.
Bro, you fucking smiling like it's fucking funny. My fucking girlfriend goes. You think it's fucking funny? What fucking hell?
So it was Anthony that said all this. It wasn't Connor, who probably with the if his jaw was broken, he probably couldn't speak.
Yeah, not very well.
No, certainly.
He had seen the past where Paul got out of trouble because of who he was. And Paul knew that, so he's just grinning, smiling, walking away.
Y'all know Alec Murdoch? That's his son. Good luck.
Now, I can understand if you're drunk staggering around, but Paul's looking around like he's walking down Main Street at 4th of July parade.
Yeah. Like a celebrity.
He's not head in hands, like crouched out like this, like what the average person would do, drunk or sober. You eventually would come to your mind, someone would say, unless you're a blackout, literally passed out, obviously, you would say, what did I do? What happened? You just wouldn't be that. It's clearly second nature to the kid to cover up shit, or like that's what his family does. And do you think you think at that age he hasn't heard from his dad about stories from the good old days and what they used to do and doesn't know about this? Come on.
Of course. Of course. And the fact that And I think that Anthony in that state and speaking just off the cuff, unfiltered, says everything. What
Mhm.
he said there, that he's over there laughing. He doesn't give a shit. Keep him away from me. Yeah, good luck. That's a murder.
That's
Like,
right.
that's
Yeah.
everything.
Right, that's spontaneous sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, of course, having been drinking as well, you're more likely to
Mm-hmm.
have looser lips. And so, yeah, you're one of the first things that's going to come to your mind. He's a
Mm-hmm.
goddamn Murdoch. What do you think's going to
Yep.
happen? Yeah.
Exactly.
Historically, Murdochs have been able to do what they want, when they want, how they want, without deference to the other people around them.
I feel like justice has been done. Truth has been vindicated. It shows that the people of Jasper County support law and order.
Many people would know a solicitor more as a district attorney, but instead of just one county or one city, he would have charge of 5 different counties in our area. The Murdoch dynasty starts with Randolph I. Then it goes to the man we'd know as Old Buster, then Randolph III, and then Alec himself.
So really, he didn't make right, did he? Like, he didn't make right. Like, something is flat.
Like, okay, there's definitely some piss in the gene pool when you get to Alex finally, or Alec, whatever you want to call him.
I know.
Do you think it was a case of each successive generation just coasting a little more and on the reputation of the previous generation, and then the previous generation's coasting on whatever the fumes of their ancestor, and then the descendants finally get to Alex, and he looks like this complete and utter fuck up. Although they said he was a good lawyer, I don't know what that means, except in the case of his colleague who said he was a gifted bullshitter.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it is. He's not a good lawyer. He can just talk shit and make you believe it. That doesn't mean I guess you are good in a way. A good liar.
Well, I mean, the ability to, there's an expression from that Elvis book I read. If you can't blind him with your brilliance, then stun him with your bullshit. And it sounds like he was getting by on name, and the ability to con his way out of anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then money, which might include money for payoffs, to the cops to make things go away. To other law enforcement people. And then, of course, if you have certain banks in your back pocket, or you deliver a certain amount of money to these banks and they're beholden to you, I mean, the system doesn't take that much to rig if you know who to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then, at the end, you become the generation that you're that one card that fucking gives way. So the whole house of cards collapses on the strength of that one person, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it seems like his brother, I don't know if there's one or two other brothers, but they seem a little bit more stable than he does. He's highly unstable.
His brother John, the one that was it John, not Randy, that got on the stand, I think, and he spoke briefly. It wasn't a very long deposition. He did seem, first of all, he seemed a little deluded or unwilling to admit exactly what his family was about, but he also seemed more level-headed, if that makes any sense.
It does. It absolutely does. No, he was a loose cannon. Alec was just a loose.
So don't you find it funny? By all accounts, Buster was the favored son, and yes, they resemble each other, but in character, you get the sense that Alex is more like Paul, or was like Paul.
Yes.
So psychologically, do you think it was? Do you think on some level? And I know this is a little too, I guess, Freudian or too metaphysical. Do you think he was looking at Paul and he hated what he saw because that was every bad aspect of himself?
Ooh, that's deep.
Yeah,
that's deep. But I don't think you're wrong. Don't think you're wrong, because Paul took it even one step further. his shit was getting out in the open.
Yes.
At least Alec was able to keep it behind the scenes for the most part.
Oh, for fuck's
So
sake, yeah.
yeah, he was just the embodiment of everything that was wrong with Alec.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever see the film, either version, but I'm thinking of the Swedish version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo?
I never saw those.
Oh, you have to watch the original one. I'll send you the link. And it's essentially it's a murder mystery, but based on the books of the same name. And the remake with Daniel Craig is okay, but the original one is the one to watch because that's usually the case. And the acting's phenomenal story. It's basically about the downfall, a family that's mostly rotten, bunch of rotten eggs, but there's a patriarch. There's a patriarch looking for who he thinks killed his niece. And so he hires a private investigator, and then it's a fantastic, fantastic film. But the gist is the family is mostly a bunch of shits. And he knows this, and he admits this. And imagine Alex, who's also a bit of a shithead himself, clearly. And then you've got these two sons. One of them plagiarized and got flunked out of law school. Buster.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other one has essentially killed a woman.
Yeah, he absolutely did. And my thinking is he was also involved in the Stephen Smith situation as well.
Do you think the Stephen Smith it was more to do with Paul or Buster? Because I have a feeling it was Buster, just because of the age difference. Like the time of Stephen Smith's death, which would have been 2015, that would have put Paul in his teens.
Yeah,
like
he would have
16,
been what, like
15.
Yeah. 14, 15.
But I mean, he certainly seems of the character of a guy that would go half cocked, get drunk, and start, wailing on somebody if he didn't, obviously on his girlfriend. So if you'll beat up your girlfriend, you'll probably try to beat up anybody. If you'll hit a woman, you'll hit anybody.
So that's one I haven't spent as much time on, but there's something to that. And I don't know if it was just a bully situation or that got out of hand, just a legit hate crime, or was, Buster involved with him in some kind of way and it got out? Like, what was the deal? I don't know. I don't know.
We'll have to, when we get to that episode, we'll cover that. But either way, I just found it fascinating that Paul, the idea that Paul was his sort of mirror image in a younger form. And maybe that's another bit of thing, that this is when they say, like, when an addict ODs, sometimes they're trying to kill the addict in themselves, not themselves. If that makes any sense. Yeah,
absolutely. It does make sense. It makes perfect sense.
So just one to chew on. And by the way, guys, one of our Patreon subscribers, Jeremy, I believe, Jeremy H, we'll just say, he says he lives on the county line of Hampton. And he says he has stories. I'm trying to get a hold of him. I want him to check his PMs or whatever. And he hasn't responded. But I'm like, please write them if you must. I'll read them. Kayla will read them. Somebody will.
Jeremy, we need your stories.
Yes, ASAP. Please. Yeah, don't sleep on that. We need this stuff.
It's only tease us that way.
Yeah.
Understand the influence that the Murdaughs had in this community. You really have to go back to Old Buster. He was the longest, most influential Murdaugh member.
As bad a case as I've ever seen. I've been solicitor 44 years.
I tended to think of that part of South Carolina as his duchy. People there had to give tribute to Buster Murdoch.
If Buster Murdoch liked you, he tried to help you every way he could. If Buster didn't like you, he'd try to hurt you any way he could.
So this is just adding a little more color to the character of the old man. And isn't that a trait that you would most likely pass on to your son, your grandson?
Of course.
Jesus H.
Absolutely. Christ. And then it just gets more and more
purified.
Yeah. Like as it goes, it just.
It's not just a 12-year-old whiskey. It's 31.
Yeah, and it just sits and it just stews and it just is like a
The rot.
Look, oh God, every time I every time I they show one of these old clips or pictures, all I hear is a gross Reba McEntire song. That's the night that the lights went out in Georgia. Like I
Are you
just hear it softly in the background.
are are you not a Reba fan particularly, or?
No, I can't stand her.
Me
Can't
neither.
stand her. That voice is disgusting.
You and
Disgusting.
me, you and my wife would
Hate
have
it.
some conversations. My wife will
Oh.
watch just about any like sitcom that will kill time. Basically, she doesn't really.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't. There's some that she can't stand, but she watched that one Reba did
Oh,
whatever
so
one,
gross.
and she sang the title song. And there's the line "I'm a survivor," and every time she plays that for me, sometimes just to fuck with me because she knows I hate it so much.
So gross. It's so
It's
gross.
awful. It's awful. It's worse than the King of Queens theme song, and that takes a lot. Anyway, we'll continue with the good old boys.
I knew Buster personally growing up, and the stories about Buster taking care of people, very real. And a lot of people to tell you, yeah, Buster have somebody taken out in a minute.
You didn't want to get on the Murdoch's bad side. It would be beneficial to stay out of the Murdoch's radar.
The Murdochs were like the
What's that movie where it's the guy in the black suit and he has the black hat on? It's
Men in
so...
Black.
No.
Where
The
they
horror
where they have the pen and they change people's.
Mm-mm.
No, which one?
It's not that. I don't know why I'm spacing right now on this. It's either Omen or Children of, like, it's one of those old 70s, 80s horror movies. It's got the man in it with the black suit on and the black hat, and he's old. That's exactly what Buster #1 looks like.
Imagine,
Creepy evil. Creepy evil.
imagine someone coming up to you. You look like someone I know. Oh yes, the horror character. It's less than a compliment. I'm not sure. I'm not up on my horror films. I mean, I know some of them, like some of the seminal ones, but I was never huge.
So mad at myself. So mad at myself right now for not
Not-
remembering.
Not Hellraiser.
Yeah. So, no.
Okay, if it comes to you, we can add it later, so no worries.
All right.
Either way, we're gonna hear. I mean, I keep expecting a goddamn orange, like Charger with the the Confederate flag on the roof to come through.
You just don't mess with them.
We will be seeking the death penalty. The South Carolina Code provides it under certain circumstances that you can.
They're the ones who determine who gets prosecuted, who gets tried. Is the death penalty sought? So not only do you have the power over the people, you got power over the system.
When you combine that with the fact that for a number of these decades, the Murdochs were allowed to have a civil practice while they had the criminal authority.
Peters, Murdoch, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich has been helping families in Hampton County and the South Carolina Lowcountry since 1910.
Do you think they did that on purpose because they were thinking pimped? P-M-P-E-D. I pimped my ride. Yeah, it's the systematic. I mean, I guess it really is a movie. At the very least, it is not just a Netflix documentary series, but I struggle to think how they're not going to come up with a dramatic recreation of this, like the way the OJ trial was made into that. I think it was Netflix, wasn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think
and it was really well done. But I mean, if you saw the trial, you really didn't need to watch that. But yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. This would be a great HBO show.
Fantastic.
Like fiction, just fiction. And it's so hard to believe that this exists in our lifetime.
Sure.
That you can trace this in like today.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so medieval and just like so back there. How could this still be going on today? This is such, it blows my mind.
Well, it's fodder for conspiracy theorists to continue making them or coming up with new theories based on precedents. I mean, the fact that stuff like this does happen, it only feeds the flame. And I think it's a more of a possibility in a country like the States where there are 50 states. It's not like we have, however many provinces in Canada. We don't have the laws. The federal laws are, the provincial laws aren't too different from province to province, but within states, between states, laws can be so up and down in terms of murder, in terms of racketeering, when you do the RICO stuff, and then the way power transitions to power, like from generation to generation. And then if you could keep something like this hush hush, where would it be? Most likely smaller Midwestern states that seem to go on under the radar. New York State, a lot of eyes, a lot of and there's corruption in the larger states on either coast as well. But this is a different kind of subtle, maybe unsubtle, but I think subtle power, but it's silent. You know what I mean? Everybody knows the Murdochs. You don't talk about them, but no one talks about it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And it went under the radar.
Yeah.
It was just happening. That's
Yeah.
just the way that it was.
That's right.
And there were probably rumors, but nobody probably really knew for sure. And, there they are. We just go on about our business. It went on for years. It was small. It was just this little pocket in this little tiny little town in the middle of nowhere. They were doing some crazy shit and nobody ever noticed. Nobody ever thought twice about it until this fucking guy blew it. Like, it took something so dramatic and crazy to catch the attention and just bring it all down.
So do you think that if something like this boat crash, the Mallory Beach death, do you think that if something like this had happened 20 years earlier, they still would have been able to squash it?
Yes, I think they would have been able to squash it now. That story, I never heard about that story until Paul and Maggie were murdered. Then all that stuff started coming out. So I really kind of believe that had Alec not totally lost it. Yeah, Paul probably something might have happened to him. They would have hushed it. It would have been kept quiet. He would have been, the black sheep or whatever. And they would have just carried on as best as they could. Alec ruined it, not Paul.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's like the prism was shattered by however many nicks and dings. Like you just eventually you can't unsee the damage that's being caused, and you can't repair it. And the financial stuff, it's sort of one crime fueled the other crime. Then in terms of the visibility of either crime, hence why. And so people, I'm still reading about, why did he do this? Why kill Paul and Maggie? And what does it have to do with being a family annihilator and what have you? And if you look at the research for family annihilators, they act like they're about the station of Alex. They're wealthy, white usually, and it's not about anger at the victims necessarily. It's about preserving your brand, for lack of a better word, your reputation, or to save your own the narcissism. Right. So we cover Howard Stern on the podcast regularly, of course, you guys, and it makes me wonder, how close would Howard get to doing something similar if certain things were to leak out?
Ooh.
Do you know what I mean? Like, do I really think he's above it? No, I don't.
I could see him doing something similar with him and Beth. Like, I don't see him taking out daughters and like all that, but I could see him like, turning on the gas thing and, like what's it called?
What, like lighting a match? Turning on the gas?
Yeah. Like he turns the stove on, the oven gas on or whatever, if he knows how to use it.
If he knows how to use it, exactly. Yeah.
Probably would have to kill the tutor as well. It shows him how to turn on the oven, but that's
Well, okay,
Um,
but on that level, I don't mean to cut you off, but I guess, but I'm going to. I'm sorry. The the suicide attempt with Eddie Smith. I can't believe I just said that sentence. Do you think it was a legit attempt at suicide? I don't.
no, mm-mm, not at all. No, no way.
Because does a narcissist ever hate themselves enough to end their own life? I don't believe it.
Not, I don't either. They love themselves way too much, and nothing is ever their fault.
Yes.
Nothing is their fault. They're always the victim.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just going through another of making himself the victim because
Yeah.
the can't remember, was the rehab before or after
The rehab
that? I
was
can't remember.
after the July 7th, and I know that was just to buy time. I don't think he did anything
Absolutely.
in rehab involving
No.
actual rehab. He didn't make amends. He
Mm-mm.
didn't. That was just about buying time and getting him out of the public eye immediately.
Mhm.
And he did what, 30 days or 4 weeks or whatever it is, 28 days. I have
Yeah.
no idea how it works. And that was just a diversion.
Absolutely it was.
Yeah.
Because he is the perpetual victim
Yeah.
in all of it. All of it. He was just putting himself in another position.
Mhm.
And the whole thing about killing himself and he was going to leave Buster the money was just this gross, disgusting ploy to look how great I am.
Yes.
I
And
was going
also
to
to
sacrifice myself.
That's right. And also to get a little sympathy on the side, if he could.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just one aspect of it. And I mean, had it been even a legit rehab thing, like he did have some addiction or whatever, like stockpiling oxys, bags of oxys, that like
Stop.
only drug runners do this.
Right.
It really is those guys like in Midnight Express strapping hash to their body and going onto the plane and trying to get away with it. That level of addiction, no, I don't believe.
No.
And we looked into it. I know you have, and I'm certain we both looked into like actual addicts of opioids, and I'm not
Mhm.
talking fentanyl, the oxys and stuff. The amounts he claims to have taken would kill most of these people. You'd just not be functional.
Of course it would.
Yeah.
Of course it would. And in order to commit suicide, why would you need to hire someone?
And
That's
obviously you're
not
not
what
getting your
suicide
you're not getting your money's worth if you don't die.
Like, what are you even doing? What are you doing? He's just so full of shit. So full of shit.
You or someone in your family has suffered a loss or has been personally injured, call us at Peters, Murdoch, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich, where our attorneys are devoted to serving your legal...
If he doesn't look like Brian Dennehy in Tommy Boy, I don't know who does. Oh man, it looks like the inside of Callahan Auto.
Oh.
The combination operated to their great financial advantage.
Without a doubt, Alex Murdaugh was a good lawyer. He was talented. He was a very dominating person and maybe even a little bit of a bully.
I myself grew up with Alex. His personality was, he should be top dog in everything.
He walks into a courtroom. He's going to point out, well, that's his dad's picture on the wall. That's his grandpa. And he's going to make sure that you know who he is. He's going to push his dominance.
You could see that smirk on his face that would tell you he's just lying through his teeth trying to be nice to you.
Now, one thing I'm going to say here, guys, on not defend, I guess it's defending the Murdochs, but if documentarians want things to go a certain way upon, making their product, they can they can edit things the way they want. They can actually, edit out stuff the way like Alec Baldwin's George Stephanopoulos interview and do multiple takes of something until they get what they want. But I don't for a minute believe, regardless of the narrative the documentarians want to make, I don't believe Anthony's father's lying.
No, I don't either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't either.
And the look he's talking about is the look that someone is born into, being told that they're the shit.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That, absolutely. That is what entitlement is.
Mhm.
That right there.
Yeah, absolutely. That smirk, that shit-eating grin,
Yes.
like I can do anything. And
Yeah.
what did we find out more? The more we find out about Paul, the more we know that this is actually a way of life for Murdoch fellas, boys specifically. So
He's always been one to scheme and manipulate, and you could always tell that you better watch him because you don't know whether what he was telling you was the truth or not.
Alex knew all the state troopers. He socialized with them. Tickets to football games, tickets to basketball games, stuff like that. That just reminds them, hey, I'll do for you whatever I can do to help you, but in return I expect the same. For example, if he works a wreck and the trooper is on the scene and he says that the fault was this particular driver and Alex needs it to be switched, that report is going to get modified. That's corruption.
And so, and a person operating from under anonymity for fear of reprisal, I mean, that that's typical with these things as well. But I know a lot of people they not they find it cowardly, but they think that if the person can't identify themselves, then they're not to be, it's not to be trusted. But we all know that's not the case.
No, it's not. And especially in a case like this, like he doesn't want to get murdered on his way home.
That's the thing. I mean, like you would watch where you're walking on the side of the road. If you're in a boat, you might look for some stray shots from hunters. Oh, sorry, I was aiming for the duck. You know. Anyway, we'll continue.
Connor said, "Daddy, we've had an accident. I need you and Mama to come to the Beaufort Hospital."
Connor Cook had a very significant jaw injury that required some surgical intervention and treatment. Morgan Doty had a very severe hand injury.
Oh, Christ.
You don't need to see that. I believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I believe you.
I believe there's a quote from his grandfather that said he...
God. Look at him.
He's being rolled in like king shit, like Nero. Like shirtless. He looks like he half a toga on because he's doffed his shirt. He's in his underwear. And we're going to find out from this video that he's, stripping down for the purposes and they had to strap him down because he was such a shit on the way to the hospital. Ah, Christ
Hannibal
almighty.
Lecter.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Have the lambs stopped sleeping? Have the lambs stopped screaming, Clarice?
Drunker than Cooter Brown.
They had to restrain Paul.
Wait, what?
That was according to the grandfather. The quote was, "Paul was as drunk as Cooter Brown." That's a reference. I have no idea what that means. Should we look up Cooter Brown?
I mean, I've heard of Cooter.
From the Dukes of Hazzard, the guy that fixed their cars for them. Hold on. Cooter Brown. Supposed origin. According to an employee of a New Orleans oyster bar who was contacted by the Old Farmer's Almanac, Cooter Brown supposedly lived on the line which divided the North and South during the American Civil War, making him ineligible for military draft by either side. He had family on both sides of the line, so he did not want to fight in the war. He decided to get drunk and stay drunk for the duration of the war so that he would be seen as useless for military purposes and would not be drafted. Ever since, colloquial and proverbial ratings of drunkenness have been benchmarked against the legendary drinker as drunk as Cooter Brown or drunker than Cooter Brown. Wow. And there's another origin story about a biracial, half Cherokee, half black man who lived in southern Louisiana.
And the mother was Reba McEntire.
She's a survivor. Oh man. Okay. So we're getting this. It starts to get good in here, guys. I want you to pay close attention as best you can. Hopefully, the video renders as well as we can possibly hope for. The goings in, the walking around, and the body language of not just Alex but his father as well.
Ambulance, and ended up putting him in his own ambulance because he was
intoxicated that bad. Fighting him. He was fighting.
They couldn't gain control of him.
Paul Murdoch was laughing at points. He was joking with people. He was completely unfazed by the fact that his friend was missing.
He was just so drunk at the hospital that he was hitting on the nurse who was trying to make sure that he was set up in his hospital bed.
He was acting out to the nurses and various emergency room personnel, just really obscene and not appropriate behaviors.
Like that kind of behavior would get me a wooden rolling pin upside the head for my mother.
You think? And did you see Alex in the corner there? Just
No.
not even phased. Yeah, that was him.
Should I go
Yeah,
back?
rewind it.
Okay, just 1 sec. Right from here?
I think so.
No,
or just before that. Okay, hold on.
Yeah, just before.
Okay, let me just scroll it back just a tad, guys.
Ambulance, and ended up putting him in his own ambulance because he was
intoxicated that bad. Fighting him. He was fighting.
They couldn't gain control of him.
Paul Murdoch was laughing at points. He was joking with people. He was completely unfazed by the fact that his friend was missing.
He was just so drunk at the hospital that he was
right there.
There you go. Yep.
Not phased, picking his teeth.
Yeah,
literally picking his teeth.
This is okay. Just another shit we got to clear up. Get the bleach.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Get the wet wipes.
You know, on the
Paw-paw's
nurse who was
done it
trying
again.
to make sure that he was set up in his hospital bed.
He was acting out to the nurses and various emergency room personnel. Just
nice catch. I wasn't even focused on him. I was looking at Paul. That's how focused I was on this little shit bag.
Yeah, he's sitting there whipping his dick out in the hospital, and Dad's just like, meh, walks off.
And he's on the phone with like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like drunk, like body disposal units or whatever. Like if you find Mallory, I want you to feed her to the fucking alligator or something. You know what I mean? So she doesn't exist. Honestly, that's how this shit happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cleanup crews, like making sure, because when a situation like this happens, he's going to call every single aspect of law enforcement that he needs to in order to suss out what's happening right now. Where's the line of communication? Who knows what? Who's been told what? CCTV stuff. He has to be on top of all that.
Mm-hmm. Do you know that one person on law enforcement, first responders, etc., called Mallory's parents? Nobody.
Shocking.
Nobody.
Christ almighty. So it was all about making sure the golden child is taken care of.
Yes. Yes.
Do you think it's one of those things like we do this, we're going to get taken care of?
No, I think they don't want to get fired. Or like beaten up in a back alley. Like they were
or murdered.
everybody just knew. Right. Or murdered.
Yeah. Unbelievable, man.
really obscene and not appropriate behaviors.
So there's Buster.
Alec Murdaugh and his father, the former solicitor Randolph Murdaugh, arrived at the emergency room, and they were trying to quarantine Paul off and prohibit him from being interviewed by law enforcement.
Now, first of all, they're his family. They're not his lawyers. So they, as far as I know, there's a conflict of interest here. And can you be represented by your own family member in the States?
I don't know.
See, I'd have to look that. I got to look that up. That seems a little. I don't know.
It does, but then you can represent yourself, so there is no telling what's allowed.
Yeah, interesting.
Appeared to be an effort by Alec Murdoch to try and influence the direction of this investigation, perhaps to subvert the investigation.
It takes about an hour to drive from Hampton to be.
Did you also notice that the grandfather had a little badge on his vest?
No, I missed that.
Hold on, let me just get a screenshot of that. Just not even take a second. Right there.
Mm.
And you can't. The quality is not good enough that we can zoom, guys. But I guarantee it's something like former solicitor or whatever. Because in the course of the trial, they mention about how Alex would drive around with a badge, saying
so that he could.
Yeah. It's like when Artie on the Stern Show, Artie and Ronnie started talking to Bowie. Got in trouble he was speeding, I think, or he got flagged. He had pulled over by the cops, and the first thing he pulled out, like from his wallet, was like a police charity card. Like he's, try to get out of it. And then Artie and Ron like, you don't do it like that, idiot. What do you? Well, first of all, you have it on the dashboard just in case, or you accident like you give it to them, you give it to the cop, and they go through it and they see it's in there. But if you do it like that, it looks like, hey, we take care of you, so you take care of me, buddy.
Such a nerd.
It was
God, he's
fun.
a nerd.
He is a dork, a complete dork. I'm gonna have to go through that clip one time because they just busted him. He said, "You're supposed to be really subtle about it, dickhead." Anyway,
the direction of this investigation, perhaps to subvert the investigation.
It takes about an hour to drive from Hampton to Beaufort Hospital. We're both crying. We started getting phone calls from Alex. And in that hour, he called 3, 4, 5 times trying to convince us that Connor was driving the boat.
The push became, is there a way that we can show that Paul was not driving?
What you have to do for a criminal case is establish reasonable doubt. So if you can create doubt that Paul was actually driving the boat at the time, then he's not going to get convicted.
When we did arrive to the hospital, Alec was already there, Randolph was already there, trying to orchestrate everything. Alec was telling me how with his influence over the judges and juries and all this, how, don't worry, he was going to take care of Connor. Make more sense to me for him to be telling us how he is using his resource to find this missing child, but no, that wasn't on his mind at all.
Yeah, Connor's dad, I meant, by the way, I screwed up earlier when I said Anthony's dad. This is Connor's dad, obviously. He's spot on. And that was one of the things the jury now have since been saying, like, when Maggie and Paul were shot, why weren't you saying you got someone did this, go out there and get them? And this is a parallel. This is almost the exact same situation under slightly different circumstances, but death is involved.
There is.
Yeah. Yep.
Somebody heard Randolph say, well, she's gone. Ain't no need to worry about her.
Christ.
Alec is walking around the hospital telling the passengers not to say anything to police. Nobody said, Alec came to my room to check on my condition to see if I was okay. They said Alec came to my room to tell me not to say who was driving the boat.
Complete cover my ass mode.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Little heads right behind him.
Do you think
behind him?
Do you think, just incidentally, that the state's decision to prosecute Alex in the county was predicated on, look what they've done to these people for decades, and they're going to want to be like, this is how you, it will seem, basically it's a chance to give the victims of decades of just absolute stifling oppression from law enforcement, getting screwed over in like lawsuits, the county court system, whatever, people who've had maybe loved ones die as a result of asking for the death penalty, they get their comeuppance.
Absolutely. And it's there's something kind of powerful about that in a way, if you think about it. Like, it's everybody knows it, but nobody's gonna say it. Kind of like, this is for us. Like, this is for us to take our town back. This is for us to get justice on like all this shit. And then they all break out into a song like that. I'm just gonna...
but also like a posturing on the state to, as if to say, we are so confident about this, we trust you in the county to not be influenced by these jerk-offs, and that we know you're going to do the right thing. We have, and keep in mind, guys, that was all decided before the OnStar data and the GPS data and everything else was obtained. And then, of course, some of the other evidence was determined later on, because they didn't get that until very late into the trial. Like and it's just, I think it was quite amazing when you think about it. But I guess, anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
It is. I like it.
Apparently talked to Connor, and Connor said he was trying to get me to say I was driving and take the blame for this instead of Paul.
Paul had called his grandfather, Randolph, from the ambulance, and Connor heard Paul tell Randolph that Cotton Top was driving the boat. That's Connor's nickname. So Connor knew right then what they were trying to do.
He called his grandfather, not his dad.
Right. He always called his grandpa. Always. And did you notice too, Grandpa, or here comes Drunky, look what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
The scene he's caused, he walks by him, Grandpa takes his little paper and gives him a little love pop on the arm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, all right, like joking, or like, you know what I mean by
Right.
that? Like my grandpa would do it to me. Give you a little pop, but it's,
I think in this
Ugh.
situation, the grandfather behind closed doors most likely reamed him a new asshole all the same. Like, I'm going to, you are my grandson, and what grandparent wouldn't do anything for their grandchild, of course.
Mhm.
But I'm certain he was like, and because think of the mentality of the family, reputation is everything. He would have been, what have
Mhm.
you done? What have you done to us? Forget the
Yeah.
girl. What have you done to us and our
Mhm.
family and everything I fucking built, or my father built and his father built? So
Yeah.
that's playing heavily, because right here, Paul looks like he's just been scolded.
Alec Murdaugh and his father were trying to arrange for a lawyer to represent Connor Cook.
And Alec said, I know the perfect guy. So that's how we got introduced to Corey Fleming.
Corey Fleming was a pretty well-known lawyer and a good lawyer. Very soon after their first meeting with Mr. Fleming, they discovered that he was Alec's son, Buster's godfather.
Corey Fleming's his son's godfather. It's his college roommate. It is one of his best friends out there. So he was trying to direct them to use Corey Fleming because he knew it would benefit him and that Corey would lead them theoretically in the right direction. Alec clearly was trying to use his people, his situation to control the entire event.
And what's the most important thing for a narcissist? Control.
Mhm. Yeah, immediately drops into it.
Yep.
Just drops into it.
Mm-hmm. And this is not only will this guy control the narrative of what he wants the family to do, he will report back to Alex everything and complete
Absolutely.
And probably in a way that wouldn't get him in a code. It wouldn't be a case of him literally telling the flat out truth of what the confidentiality agreement between client lawyer privileges, attorney client privilege. It would be like, yeah, I don't believe the Boston Red Sox are going to capitulate, things like that. You know what I mean? Some kind of weird code. But he could, that's one way that a thing like that would happen, I believe.
Yeah, they all have a little team of yes men,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just readily available. All of them. They're like not even people. They're just like these little robotic
pawns.
Yes.
Pawns on the chessboard, just like the Godfather when he says, "Look, I have all these judges and lawyers in my back pocket." Like, and you need that to maintain full control. You do need your fingers on the pulse of every single aspect of the when I should say the business, the system. Rather.
We didn't have a clue that he and Alec go back to college and were roommates and best friends, and Corey's a godfather of one of Alec's children. We didn't know any of that.
He already had the plan in motion, and we fell for it.
He was relieved of duty pretty quickly thereafter when those relationships became known to the Cooks.
It was actually pretty hard for him to find an attorney that would represent Connor.
Because of who they were up against.
We're not going against the Murdaughs, no.
The first two lawyers we spoke to told us that if Buster Murdoch was still alive, we wouldn't have to worry about all of this because Connor would already be crab bait and it wouldn't be a problem.
That's another eerie comment I remember distinctly.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd liquidate the fucking survivors of the crash, the witnesses.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Man. I don't think I'll be visiting South Carolina anytime soon. You never know what Murdoch might be working at a diner.
Exactly. If I do go there, I will keep my mouth shut.
These eggs were not cooked right. All of a sudden, I'm gone.
Meanwhile, first responders were focused on trying to save Mallory and not registering that we're going to need to make this into a crime scene now, not later. The Murdoch said, we know what could happen next, and we need to protect ourselves. They circled the wagons better than law enforcement did.
That night at the accident scene when they had taped it off, Mallory's parents wanted to go down to the water, and they wouldn't let anybody pass that tape. And Mr. Randolph and Maggie came up, and they lifted the tape and let them go right under.
The boat itself was now recognized hours later to be a crime scene.
There's been descriptions made of efforts to get the boat away from the scene of the crash. The local law enforcement officers there enlisted the help of a member of the Murdaugh family to bring the trailer to the scene.
Strikes me as a bit odd that the Department of Natural Resources would not have trailers, since I would assume that agency has hundreds of boats. It's a little astonishing that a family member could get anywhere near the scene of the crime.
We knew some of the law enforcement that were there, and we knew that they were close friends with the Murdoch family. It's always been that way because if you were in law enforcement, you were close friends with the Murdochs.
And so, leading us back, fast forward to the killing of Mags and paw-paw. Do you think the sled mistakes made in the initial like cordoning off of the scene and not actually getting all the treating Alex like a suspect instead of a victim, do you think that was incompetence? Do you think it was corruption, like corruption based, like they're going to give him some leeway? I think it tends to be the former. I just tend to think they're not law enforcement. Everything is not all cops are SVU, Law and Order. Not everybody's a homicide investigator. A cop is a cop, but they're not all trained the same way.
Right. And I don't think, it's just so hard to say, but I could see it not being intentional.
Right.
The mistakes that they were making. They were probably letting him lead the investigation to a certain point, letting him take charge.
Right.
And if they had all, been brought up to know that it's King Baby number 2.
Yeah. And also maybe a little bit of, he can't possibly have been the person to shoot them.
Right.
Because we don't know about his financial stuff. We don't know everything else that's going on. We just know that it's a report. But so I think there's a little bit of subliminal fear on behalf of the investigators, which sounds odd. You think if you were a cop, you wouldn't be afraid of, a family, however well established they are in the community. So anyway,
but,
just curious about that.
Yeah.
It appears that some evidence is missing. Paul's clothing, Paul's cell phone, items from the boat that should have been preserved.
Some of the evidence has disappeared.
Wow. Sound familiar?
Now that's straight up bullshit right there. We all know that is absolute bullshit. The family member comes and gets crime scene boat.
Evidence.
Obviously, so they can strip it.
Of course.
Get the shit out of it. I mean, that is so blatant.
Yes, absolutely.
Certain DNA evidence that we know was collected is now unaccounted for. How that occurs is a mystery to me.
A lot of the local people were like, we know there's nothing you can do. So we just kind of give up hope and just let whatever happens happen, because we've seen it so many times.
Thank you all for listening or watching, as the case may be, and we hope to see you on the next one. Take care, guys.